This episode of the BeanCast is brought to you by Flava Naturals. See for yourself what a super burst of flavanols can do for your brain and physical health. Go to flavanaturals.com and use the offer code BOB for 20% off your first order. Bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Transcription services provided by transcribeme.com. Visit them on the web at transcribeme.com/beancast for up to 25% off. That's transcribeme.com. Episode 494, OTT You Know Me. For Monday, May 7th, 2018. It's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob North. Thanks for joining us. Simplicity is the driving force of marketing. We take the complex problems of business and reduce them to simple, actionable solutions. But what if that's the wrong approach? Is complexity the better solution for complexity? Tonight we'll discuss. Also, the inherent problems of over-the-top, unpacking a bold move by the Conan show, whether bots can make us more strategic, plus this week's Ad Fail 5. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with the super advisor at the Innovation Scout, author, speaker, Mr. Joseph Jaffe is back. Hi, Joe.
Hello, Bob. Now, I heard through the grapevine, and by grapevine I mean Skype, that it's your birthday today.
It is my birthday, so happy birthday to me.
So without further ado, I'm going to hijack your show off the bat and sing to you. And hopefully my two panelists will join me.
Can't you just give me an Amazon gift card or something?
Okay, fine. You just hijacked my hijack. Happy birthday.
Thank you very much. Now, also with us, we have the Chief Strategy Officer at Santee out of Scottsdale, Arizona, author, speaker, Mr. Adam Pierno. Adam, hi.
Bob, how are you? Happy birthday, and thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for being on the program. First time. Glad to have you on. Now, finally, we have the CEO of Red Thread, message strategist and consultant, and much sought-after speaker, Ms. Tamsen Webster. Hi, Tamsen.
Hey there. Happy birthday, Mr. President.
I already said I want gift cards. No songs.
That's what you're getting.
Well, let's get right into the topics. And first up, I read an interesting report from the Complexity Symposium. Interesting name for a symposium, but you'll understand in a minute. It happened in Rhode Island this past week, and it kind of rocked my world. Business and marketing and advertising in particular are obsessed with simplifying business problems down to their core and then developing simple, easy, understandable solutions that address these needs. But with technology racing ahead and the marketing environment growing more individualized and personalized, some question whether simple solutions are the answers any longer. So, Joe, has our mission as marketers now evolved into embracing complexity without the safety net of simple guiding principles to bring us to solutions? I mean, this is a lot to unpack, and my mind's still reeling. I've got a lot of thoughts on it, but I want to get your thoughts first. So what are you thinking?
Well, I was completely confused and didn't understand it at all. It was too complex for me. But
we know that's not true.
Upon further reflection, look, I love this topic, and it actually reminds me of this little, this saying that I often use when I talk to marketers. I say, simple, not simplistic, complex, not complicated. And it's
I love that. Complex, not complicated. That in and of itself says a lot more than I was even hoping to hear from you. So go ahead.
Well, I'm out. I'm basically that. Do a George Costanza, end on a high. But I think it demonstrates. I mean, for so long as marketers, we've all been into simplifying or oversimplifying the whole process of building brands and ultimately going to market. Everything was as simplistic as possible in terms of shipping a 30-second spot to the 3 networks, and that's how easy it was. And what's obviously happened thanks to technology, I mean, even going back to digital, right, and thinking about online advertising and how marketers had kind of been trapped in this quagmire of versioning the same piece of creative 33,000 ways from Sunday. And so in a way, we've been trapped between a rock and a hard place, trying now and almost looking at technology as a false god to be able to automate. I know we're going to be talking about something like that shortly, to try and make life easier for us. But the point is that it is complex, but it doesn't have to be complicated, especially if you understand the intricacy and the different permutations and the different combinations of what might be possible. And on the flip side, the simplicity associated with it is the idea of an idea, the ability to be creative, to surprise, to delight, and ultimately to connect and break through. And so an insight can be so simple and yet doesn't have to be dumbed down to the point where it can be oversimplified. And so, you can go really deep into this topic. I will say that when I read the source article, it didn't give me too much, and so I kind of almost took it in a different direction. But I think
I agree 100%, because it's just like I read the source article and it really didn't speak to me in and of itself, but it hinted at these really amazing new thinking that I really hadn't considered before.
Well, it did, and it quotes a good friend of mine and an online advertising real, tenured vet, which is Scott Sorokin, and he talks about a chair, and he says you look at the chair, but then you take a couple of steps back and you say, but it's not just a chair with 4 legs. Where is the chair positioned in the room, and what direction is it pointing at? And then if you take a step back, you go, well, why is the chair then? And you look at the room in context of the building, and you keep on going backwards. And I think, the analogy there with business is when we oversimplify a decision, when we try and create ROI that is so short-term and myopic, and we attempt to make it as binary and causal as possible, we're not recognizing that there are bigger questions and bigger implications of the decisions we make in terms of not just the campaign, but the brand, the business the organization itself, the industry we're in, and even the world, and recognizing that these decisions have far-reaching implications. A decision today that might be an experiment or gamble for a struggling retailer could actually end up creating a paradigm or a new go-to-market or new distribution mechanism that could potentially save the retail industry. So, I mean, I think that's kind of one of the interpretations I took away from it.
Let me turn to Adam next on this one, because I think that there is a lot of complaining about the strategy portion of advertising these days. I hear it from people who are creatives in the business, in the agency world. I hear it from brands. There's this idea that strategy focused so much on simplicity ends up being almost banal, that there's no real depth to the thinking. It's so focused on being simple solutions that it overlooks the problem entirely, because it doesn't embrace the entire scope of what the marketing department at a brand is facing. How much are you seeing this to be a reality and a trouble within the industry?
Well, let me just say from the top, I'm one of the one of the people that are complaining about it. So I totally get it. The issue, and Joseph, you hit it right on the head. It's all about ideas. If we're trying to be simple but not simplistic, the reason that it gets complicated is because we don't understand, or we're not either given the vision to understand, or we don't give access to understand, or we don't take the time, which shame on us when that happens, to understand the entire system, and then figure out what those far-reaching consequences of each action will be, and bring back a realistic, simplified model for our clients or for our brands that keep it simple in a way that we're building a campaign, or building a product, or building an effort that is as streamlined as it needs to be within this greater mechanism, and the complexity is just growing and growing as everybody's bolting on more and more pieces. So it's not an easy challenge, and it's really about taking the time to figure out what can you strike from the list of things to worry about and what can't you.
Tamsen, you've been a marketing lead. I mean, you've been a chief marketing officer. You've had to deal with all the many pieces that go into motion whenever you're trying to launch a kind of marketing plan for any kind of the initiatives that you were doing. Let me ask you about the ability of a single person, a marketing lead, to manage the complexities that they're facing these days. Is it possible, or is it more about building the correct team around you? And the bigger your organization, is it becoming more and more paramount that you just have a team and that you trust a team as opposed to having actual control over the many pieces that are in motion?
I think you need to understand the pieces that are in motion. I think that's the role of any chief of anything, is that your job is to understand the components of the system and how they work together. So think of it from the perspective of, do I understand the interconnections, and are they healthy? Are they making sense? Are they working? I think the team is there to understand the depth. So if the chief is looking at the breadth, then the team is looking at the depth. And in that way, each party gets to focus on how to make things fairly simple for them. But if you try to do everything all at once, let me try to understand the complete, breadth of the system, plus all of it down to its details across all the channels, across all of our segments and our targets. Of course, that's going to get complicated. But that's why it's really important to understand how can you, where your own personal strengths are, and where can you back that up with other people.
It seems almost impossible, though, when you think about it, because you can have a certain amount of understanding of all the pieces that are in motion, and you can understand to a certain extent what all the different players you put in place are going to be doing to make sure that the vision is achieved. But is the vision even possible for? Is the vision even seeable for a Campbell's Soup? Is the vision even seeable for a McDonald's that has so many different efforts going on at the same point, with so many different problems that are both national, local, and also global? Is it even possible for one person to have any kind of understanding, or are we going to be depending more and more on ad tech and more on machine learning to manage these ever increasingly complex situations?
Well, I think we have the ability to manage them more effectively through those things, but the situation is not more complex than it ever was. We just have a greater awareness of it, thanks to all of that. That's the thing that we have to figure out. And so, what always worked well for me and works for my clients is figuring out what are essentially to figure out how can we build frameworks and not necessarily formulas. Formulas aren't contextual enough. You can't adapt. It's one of the reasons why I think brand taglines, for instance, and a lot of brand positioning is entirely too simplistic, to echo what Joe was saying. We have to figure out what is it that what are the underlying levers, kind of what are the pillars upon which things are functioning? Why does the company do what it does? Not just a single like Simon Sinek why, but actually, why does it do what it does in the way that it does it for specific pieces of the market? And I think what's been really interesting is the advent of all the tech and all the data and all the information has just allowed us to understand the kind of all the different levels at which we can be simple. But to your question, can one person understand it all? Not to the detail level, but can somebody, one person understand and be responsible for making sure the company and the brand is delivering on those foundational elements that drive what it does? Yeah, and I think if you don't have that, that's where brands go off the rails.
I was thinking. Well, first of all, it's an and scenario as well, which makes it a little bit more complex. But I was thinking of you put these two together and you have either simple complexity or complex simplicity, and then I realized that that's just probably Dan Ariely's next book. But the thing is that it's a key point that these two are not mutually exclusive, and to add to this idea of HR and talent. The article also talks about a report, the Futures of Learning report, that actually talks about 4 skills that are going to be most valued by institutions around the world. So when you actually read them the first time, they don't sound that radical. They're critical thinking, problem solving, communication and collaboration, and then creativity and innovation. And that to me says, well, those should be skills that we have today. But then it says, together those skills would kind of combine in order to create more ambitious goals by adding complexity to the thought process. And then I looked at that and I was like, that's still not telling me what I need to know. But then I had like an aha, which is, this is just really kind of best described as the life of an entrepreneur or a startup. Their ability to what if, their ability to be creative and lateral in their thinking and recognize that they may end up in a very, very different place from the one that they started. And it's the kind of scenario planning and contingency planning that I think really we're talking about. One is plan for a multitude of scenarios and what if scenarios, and really kind of create much more complex. I love what Tamsen said in terms of this idea of frameworks as opposed to formulas, but then also be prepared through some kind of process or guidelines to be able to act quickly, decisively, and intelligently in terms of adapting to unforeseen and unexpected market conditions.
One of I agree with that to an extent, but I have a problem with depending upon frameworks. I've always said frameworks are the new astrology. They work 6 times out of 10, and we give them all the credit, and then when they fail, we make excuses for them because somehow they just didn't effectively deal with the problem that one time. And I'm a little bit concerned about depending entirely upon frameworks as opposed to dealing with each problem individually, which, it's a nice to have solution, but it becomes increasingly increasingly impossible in a complex world. So
but it's also increasingly impossible to deal with a problem by problem in an increasingly complex world too, unless you have some baseline.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's impossible to handle things case by case in an increasingly complex world, right? And it's just like, so where is the happy medium between depending upon a framework, which is right most of the time, but can be disastrously wrong sometimes, as opposed to dealing with each individual problem individually and uniquely and getting the problem solved, but making it scalable? Is that like a dependence upon AI to make that happen?
I don't think so. And I think, and my perception of frameworks is kind of understanding, the kind of the corporate agreement that this is, these are the people whom we serve. This is what problem we solve for them. This is the thing that we help them achieve. This is the perspective that we as a company take. Here are our core truths and beliefs. And I think if people are well versed in those kinds of things, then it isn't something that should ever lead you to disastrous handling of a particular situation. It's when people get away from those fundamental, kind of elements of code that drive how a company manifests in the marketplace. It's when people get away from that, they try to operate away from that those mistakes exist. And again, AI just helps you, I think, validate the data and be an outside check on what you're seeing. But I think that if with the complexity, it's ever more important to understand what are the things that do not change or for your company should not change over time. And those are the commands in the operating system.
I love that. I love that because that goes very, very close to what Dave Gray always said. I mean, Dave Gray wrote the book, The Connected Company, and I know a few other people have espoused The Connected Company, this pod-based approach to dealing with an organization where you have some core truths about the organization that are managed by an executive team, but the true power and the brand lies within each of these different operating pods so that you can be able to deal with problems uniquely as they show up in a way that is adhering to the basic principles of the entire corporation.
And also, not that this topic is about frameworks per se, but, one of the things that I've always thought of is the framework is actually shouldn't have to be a stifling or confining if you can operate liberally within the framework. And so having those guide, those guardrails, etc., can prove to be incredibly empowering and powerful. And the example that just jumps into my mind is the one that's always spoken about for the Ritz-Carlton, where any employee at the Ritz-Carlton, any employee from the lowest of the low in terms of the someone who might have the most menial job, or at the Ritz-Carlton, they're empowered to spend up to $2,000 on a customer without getting any permission from their manager.
Zappos has the same thing. Zappos had this,
right,
maybe not to that $2,000 mark, but yeah, it's the same type of principles.
Where it gets interesting, they still have to be accountable ultimately and submit their report.
Right.
And if it turns out that they abused that privilege, or they abused that power, I think it would be taken away from them. But when you can actually create that mechanism to allow people to make those decisions for themselves, whether AI helps us or whether it's just your God-given common sense or brain, incredible things are possible. And sometimes the complexity is you can't imagine that someone's going to be standing outside hailing a cab or an Uber or whatever, and a truck comes past, hits, it's pouring with rain, hits some mud, and now someone's, their suit is ruined and they're about to go into an important pitch. To have someone come and say, you know what, come into the clothing boutique and we'll kit you out in designer gear and you can go to your meeting and knock them dead, and that creates a customer for life.
Yeah, and we've been circling around this idea that if we have these guiding principles, whether it's the $2,000 rule or whether, Tamsen, you had referenced earlier, the kind of framework for which people can operate within the brand, understanding the brand, understanding the mission, the vision, the values. When those things are really nailed down, then it doesn't matter. It minimizes, it's not that it doesn't matter, but it minimizes some of the complex interactions and complex things that happen where, as technology and marketing are increasingly overlapping, we're seeing from our clients, we're seeing a lot of people from all over the organization bringing in solutions that are small tech or ad tech or unique things. They're plugging them into the system and nobody's really sure they're even there. But if there's a guidance internally that this is how this brand operates and this is the kind of decisions we make, or you're empowered to do this or that based on it to withhold our vision and values, then people make the right decision. And that reduces complexity, at least on one front, that internally you can kind of sleep at night knowing, okay, at least the people inside the building or the buildings are all moving in the same direction and not just running around like a zoo.
Adam, I'm going to follow up with you on that, because one of my last questions I had written down about this topic was the role of the CMO. Does this put a premium on the ability of a CEO to recruit and to manage employees and to essentially have an HR sensibility to the way that they're dealing with their department, as opposed to just being purely a marketing professional? I mean, is it more important to be good in the HR discipline than it is to be good at marketing, essentially, to be a good CMO in the ever complex, growing complexity of marketing today? I mean, what's your thoughts?
Yeah. Go ahead, Tamsen.
The way that I always thought about it was that I could always train someone in a skill, but I couldn't train a mindset. And so as a CMO, and as I would hire my team, I was always looking for people who had the kind of critical thinking, the kind of problem solving skills that I was looking for, because maybe there was a channel they didn't understand or a certain thing they needed to do. But, when it comes down to it, a lot of the mechanics of marketing are pretty simple. I mean, maybe one step above monkey, I don't know, could do it. But what the hard part of marketing is the thinking about the marketing. It's being sensitive to what is it the company needs to have happen, what do the customers need to have happen. And marketing is in this unique position of needing to translate both directions. And that takes a certain kind of mindset and a certain kind of ethos of how does someone see a particular situation. And so, yes, as all of these things get more and more complex, I think that becomes ever more important. But I would argue that a great CMO was always hiring that way, more than anything else. Anything
to add to that, Adam? Any last thoughts? Adam. I guess not. Well, we'll get back to Adam.
I've stunned him into silence.
I think you have. Well, we'll check back on Adam in just a minute. Adam, you there?
I'm here. I'm sorry. I was stunned into silence. Yeah.
Well, we're going to move on anyway to the next topic in just a minute. We're going to talk about over the top and how all the digital publishers seem to be completely going, all in on this particular subject. We'll get to that in just a minute. But first, I have an important announcement. It's Mother's Day. It's coming up. Mother's Day is next weekend. When we're recording this on a Sunday, next Sunday, Mother's Day in the U.S. And what you're going to need more than anything else is chocolate, because chocolate is amazing. The flavanol antioxidants in dark chocolate are great for you and great for your mom. And no one does chocolate better than our sponsors, Flavonaturals. Look, here's a fact, and it's a simple fact that we need to understand. Science supports that the flavanols in dark chocolate benefit brain function, they benefit heart health, and they benefit exercise performance. That sounds like a perfect gift for mom, doesn't it? But to get enough flavanols from your average dark chocolate to actually see these benefits, you're likely going to have to eat 5 bars or more, which is not going to make your mother happy. That's why I was so excited to discover the Flavonatural system, because one Flavonatural bar made from ultra premium cocoa beans crams in the flavanol benefits of 5 typical dark chocolate bars at 1/5 the calories. And their sugar-free mix has the benefits of 9 typical chocolate bars with even fewer calories. Now you put it all together, and mom's going to be feeling like a super strong brainiac, just like you are going to be doing when you have a case of these things sitting in your house. Now, they ship me a bunch of the product, okay? I wouldn't be telling you about it unless I actually tried it and felt good about it, and I am absolutely loving it. These bars are some of the best tasting chocolate bars I've ever had. Not blowing smoke up your skirt. These things are absolutely delicious. And I took their 10-day challenge with their mix by simply adding it into my morning cup of coffee, and I could immediately feel the benefits, which brings me to the big opportunity for you. Now, my high-functioning chocolate-enhanced brain tells me that you may want some delicious super chocolate as well. And if you do, I can get you some for 20% off. Just go to flavanaturals.com. That's flavanaturals.com. Order the 10-day challenge packet. Get some bars to try. Why not order a case? Get it for everybody at work. Get it for all the moms in your office. Get it for your mom. Get it for your grandmom. Get it for your wife. And enter the code BOB at checkout for a 20% discount. But hurry, offer ends July 31st, and Mother's Day is coming up even sooner than that, so you're going to definitely want to get online and do this right away. Now, that site again is flavanaturals.com. Offer code BOB, B-O-B. If chocolate is your weakness, let Flavonaturals be your strength. And we thank them very much for their support of our show. And I never, ever get tired of reading this ad. I never get tired of eating these chocolate bars. This is so freaking amazing.
That's my favorite sponsor ever. And I'm just pointing out that I'm a mom and I love chocolate. Just putting that out there.
Dropping a hint. I like it.
It may be your birthday, Bob, but it's my Mother's Day in a week.
I put out the birthday call for Amazon gift cards and it didn't work. So I'm not so sure this is going to work for you, but I hope it is. I hope everybody out there is going to send you a case of Flavanaturals, because it'll make my sponsor extremely happy.
That's awesome.
Well, anyway, let's move into the next topic. Publishers at the new fronts have gone all in on over the top. The idea of cutting out cable carriage fees was once pure heresy. Now the power is shifted, and nearly every content publisher, whether they're online or offline, is actively offering or working towards some kind of over-the-top solution. But Adam, is OTT the holy grail that networks and publishers think that it is, or just the beginning of some kind of long march into user confusion and even greater content discovery problems, which, as we all know, is the Achilles heel of content online? Discovery is becoming so much harder. So what's your thinking on over the top?
Well, we were just talking about complexity, and welcome back. We're talking about complexity again. So
there is method to my madness.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, there's method to my madness in picking these topics, but go ahead.
I love it. I use a Roku, and every time I log onto that thing or fire it up, there's another 3 channels on there. I don't know what they are. Every now and then I'll click on one and try to figure out what kind of shows I can get. So as a viewer, I have one perspective, but if we look at it from the publisher side, the new fronts in 2017 had over 30 participants. This year they were down to 16. The slate was 2 weeks long for last year's new fronts. This year it was down to 1. And two of the most interesting publishers around, Bloomberg, who is a publisher that I'd watch very closely because of all the interesting moves they make, and Vice actually did a weird end around. They didn't participate in the new fronts, but they did tease out programming and opportunities for advertisers through some kind of interestingly timed events. So I guess what you have to remember about the new fronts is they're modeled after the upfronts, but it's essentially a sales event for IAB and its members. And I don't know about you guys, but as I've tried to, meet new clients and network and sell things in, people really back away from that. They don't want to be sold to. So I think the new fronts is floundering a bit because really nobody wants to come and
I don't know that I necessarily agree with that premise. I mean, as far as the new fronts are modeled after the upfronts, which are all about selling to the media buyers. So
absolutely.
I think that there's nothing wrong with the selling portion, but I do see that the new fronts have an ongoing problem. And we kind of discussed this last week, so I don't want to delve too deeply into this, but essentially the new fronts are experiencing the same thing that the digital advertising agencies experienced. Digital advertising went off into its little ghetto and created a world where it existed, but then suddenly they grew to the point where they needed to abandon that space and enter the mainstream in order to get agency of record accounts. And I think that a lot of digital publishers are starting to meet in the middle with offline publishers who are kind of coming online, and they're finding a new way to combine together. And it's more about getting the ad dollars, the primary ad dollars, than it is about promoting digital versus offline content. I mean, it's more about the fact that all content will be streaming at one point or another. And so putting yourself into a segregated area called the new fronts isn't really beneficial to you anymore. So I can see why Over the Top has become kind of the rallying cry of all these content publishers, because it gives you direct access to your audience. It gives you direct access to the people who are actually watching the content, consuming the content, and ultimately seeing the advertising. That's a greater portion of the pie. You're not, as content creators, being forced to go to some kind of distribution network like a cable company or a broadcast network. You've got control of the pipes. But it seems to me that if you get everybody playing in this space, the complexity makes it so that nobody wins anymore, because there's only going to be a few players that can rise to the top in the attention of the public at large. I mean, so that's my basic premise. Any thoughts on that?
No, I mean, I 100% agree that as a publisher, really, where else can you go? I don't think it's a choice they're making at this point. I think the Brave brands have already done that. They've already made that choice. Now it's kind of like, if we want to survive, we have to figure out those direct ways to get to consumers and provide attribution numbers to advertisers. If you look at what happened with the Esquire brand getting slaughtered with carriage costs and getting pulled ultimately from satellite, they weren't able to stay on the air because of those carriage costs and what cable companies were doing. But viewers and viewer complexity, yes, it's nice to have a direct pipe from an advertiser to an individual, but I don't know if viewers are going to show up in the numbers that advertisers need to make it work. And I can't say most publishers in the digital space are doing such a great job at selling advertising that I put a ton of faith in their ability at the over-the-top level either.
Tamsen, publishers are kind of in a rock between a hard place. They've got a situation where they need to be creating some kind of solution to get them into the streaming space, especially the offline players. And the online players are looking at over-the-top solutions to take them into living rooms as opposed to just being on computers. So it seems like they've got to do this. They've got to play within this space. Is there a better choice out there, or is this the only road available? And is this something that you just got to make your peace with and do if you're a content publisher these days?
I think you got to make your peace with it and do it. I mean, it was fascinating when Tom and I were talking about the topics for tonight. it occurred to us that we had a really interesting case study here at home, which is, this morning, via Facebook, we, saw two different clips from last night's Saturday Night Live, which of course are bracketed with ads on either side. And then we went and watched what we had recorded on TiVo last night, but skipped through all the ads. And yes, of course, we could have accessed it on Hulu and watched it with other ads built in. But I mean, I think what's increasingly happening is these publishers have to find a way to get the ads in front of people, and so they have to figure this out, and they have to be there.
Joe, anything to add before we move on? Any last thoughts on the situation with over the top? I know you weren't necessarily the person to go to on this.
Well, I could give you some first thoughts. Well, I mean, I think if we frame this topic, through the lens of again, simple and complex, the reality is that, and the real simple truth is that the deluge and the quantity of interruptive 30-second spots is going away or is declining precipitously, and whether it was 13 or 17 minutes of advertising per 1 hour of programming, those days are over. And it's interesting to me to see how every one of the major networks, whether it's broadcast or cable, is looking to create their direct-to-consumer solution. And in some cases, and I know we've discussed this before, CBS has attempted, as would the arrogant Viacoms and CBSs and Disneys, to attempt to charge and put content into a paywall. And so what we really are looking at is a whole landscape reshuffle. And in some cases, there is a simplicity of, just like ABC, CBS, and NBC, now we almost look at a Hulu, Netflix, maybe Amazon even, as kind of a big three. On the other hand, you're looking at a super fragmentation as well. Consumers are in control, and consumers will ultimately choose. But there's a real danger in terms of everybody trying to own and control their OTT solution, that several publishers might be completely left behind because consumers just aren't going to be able to sign up, subscribe, pay, and figure out a way to monetize all this content. There isn't
That's exactly my point. Yeah, absolutely.
Content isn't that good. And so you're between a real rock and a hard place in terms of figuring out, do you shack up, which devil do you shack up with? The lesser of evils. Do you shack up with the cable companies, but recognizing that people are cutting the cord increasingly so, or do you align yourself with one of the new players, or do you attempt to go it alone? And
well, the cable companies allowed for a lot of subpar content to exist because it was supported by the really great content, because cable companies forced you to buy it all in a bundle. And I think that over the top actually being seems like it's a great solution for consumers because you only buy the content you want, but you end up spending even more money. And I'm wondering if in the end you're going to see a backlash towards some kind of digital streaming cable company type solution, like the Hulus and Netflix of the world will really win out in the end, as opposed to any kind of over-the-top solution from an individual network. Because eventually consumers are going to go, I'm not getting all the content I need to entertain me because it's too expensive to buy all these different networks.
Right, and I mean, just as two personal examples, I'm a Star Trek fan, but I have not seen one episode of the new Star Trek because I refuse to pay CBS, for the privilege of watching that. But at the same time, I'm very interested in The Handmaid's Tale, and I just downloaded and paid for the entire series, not through Hulu, but through iTunes. And I chose to do that. I'm sure some people, the hope, obviously, and I'm sure it's worked for Hulu, is that Handmaid's Tale has become an anchor tenant per se, like a Game of Thrones or a Sopranos to HBO.
You just can't admit that Hulu is actually good now. You've been such an anti-Hulu person for so long.
I don't know what else is on Hulu, but I can tell you that hopefully they got some of my money for The Handmaid's Tale.
I know that they did. Well, moving on, another announcement at this week's Television Meets Digital Fronts was the move by TBS to shorten Conan, the Conan O'Brien show, to 30 minutes on the network while expanding his digital-only content offering. Tamsen, from an advertising perspective, what is the game that they're playing here? What's the long game in trying to reduce the footprint of Conan on the cable network as opposed to increasing the network's exposure online? Is it more of this over-the-top type movement, or are they trying to do something else?
Yeah, I would see it as a continuation, frankly, of the previous discussion. I mean, I think that that at least where we are right now, people are conditioned to skip ads on television, and we're a little bit, though not a lot, a little bit more tolerant of the ads when we're watching on a computer or from a stream. And so I think that's what they're counting on. But they're also counting on, I think, the fact that like super fans will go for more. And there is this, I want to see this other thing. So back to Saturday Night Live, it's always interesting to me how often we end up going to watch the cut scenes, which means now we're exposed to not only the advertisement that we might have been subject to because we watched it on Hulu or on TiVo or live, but now we're going to go subject ourselves to even more in order to see the other stuff because those are the fans. So you combine that with the AI discussion we're having with our first topic, and then it starts to get very interesting about how precisely advertisers can target specific people, specific programs, and the intersection between the two. So I find it a really fascinating thing. I mean, Conan's been very, very savvy about how he's integrated online, on air, and live events. And I'm really intrigued by that. I think we're seeing a little bit, I think it feels very familiar to me, the way that a lot of music performers, live music, the concerts now have been the main drivers. That's the main driver of money, because that's the rare experience. And so it's just interesting to me, is it going to go velvet rope? Is it going to do any of, is it going to be things that are open? I don't know. You could see him potentially going to kind of a membership site even. But I just think it's very intriguing to see how he's experimenting with where different people are and how they interact, and building on the conversation we just had about OTT. And I totally cannot be the only person that's like hearing that awful club song from the 90s, like anytime you say OTT, right? Who's down with OTT?
No, you're not, because Jonathan Sackett was just on last week and made the same exact joke.
You cannot not think about that if you're of a certain age. And I'm not admitting that I am, but I'm just saying. I'm just very intrigued by it. I think the smart advertisers right now are the ones that are experimenting. They're experimenting with all the different forms, and I think that they're taking the data. If they're smart, they're taking the data and saying, for the people that we serve, for the people that we're trying to target, what's the best mix?
What's most interesting about the Conan move for me is that he's not doing what most of the late night show hosts are doing, which is repurposing the offline content for online purposes. What he's trying to do is create online only content and try to make that more valuable than the cable network programming. So, I mean, it's a real big risk in a lot of ways, because it's saying that most of the original content that we're going to be producing is being produced for digital distribution only. That's a big vote of confidence, or it's a big risk. I'm not sure which. Joe, you were going to say something.
Well, first of all I can keep hearing in my head is Jonathan Sackett. So,
all of us feel the same way. Jonathan opens his mouth and it's like an earworm.
It's a curse of being a regular on the show, but we love Jonathan. I love this move for many reasons, and I think it's probably important to recognize that there is probably a very pragmatic cost saving associated with making this decision of going 30-30 and splitting it the way they are. But over and above that, and it could be based on talent and just based on distribution costs. And but I think at the same time, I agree with you, Bob, that the reality is there is so much sameness today. And in this new era of there are no late night wars anymore, where all of these guys, whether it's Colbert or Fallon or Kimmel, they all seem to be kind of collaborating with each other and supporting one another. Recognizing that the rising tide floats all boats, right? The enemy of my enemy is my friend, and in this case, the real enemy is probably OTT. You know me, but but I think in this particular case, he's going to focus on a certain quality and a certain audience, and then recognize that he can probably start to do some very, very different things in an online only, in a digital environment, and that may allow him to also evolve his brand and his authentic voice. So I don't see any downside with this at all. And we've seen other models. I mean, Bill Maher does it as well, where he has his overtime. And
I'm
and
just
in other
angry at Conan because I made this suggestion when he first got fired from NBC. I mean, I was a really big fan of the sector out there in the online space that was talking about that maybe he would go to YouTube and take his show to YouTube and be the first digital only late night talk show. And it seems like if he had done it, like 10 years ago, it would have been much more impactful than it's going to be now. And that's the problem. It feels like it's a little too little, a little too late.
Do you think it would have worked had he done it then? Would he have been just ahead?
He would have made more money because YouTube was willing to spend the cash on him, and it would have continued. It would have gone on, and it would have been just as successful as what he's getting out of TBS. I mean, you can't tell.
Bob, I'm tracking with you 100% because just don't forget when he went to TBS after getting fired and the whole hashtag Team Coco thing happened, they had invested in a 4-hour block with him, a couple of late night shows that kind of built up. So things have changed very quickly in that space because of the success of NBC and CBS and ABC shows to kind of drive this. But I like that they are not just cutting bait, and I don't know if that's a contractual thing or what. And I agree that he will be able to experiment. I don't know if there's too many people that would be able to improve their show by going online, but I have a feeling he'll be freed from some of the shackles, and he'll be one of those performers that thrives there because of his offbeat writing and sense of humor. And I think it'll help TBS too, I believe, in the long run, because I think they're looking for a beachhead in the digital space and haven't really been able to figure it out. They did a couple of test shows over the past 3 or 4 years, but this is something with a brand that people recognize that you may actually start downloading, like those cutscenes from SNL, where it's worth logging on because I know I'm going to get. If I download this or I watch it, I'll at least get some smirk out of it, something shareable.
Adam, I'm going to follow. Go ahead, Tamsen. You're going to say something.
Yeah, I'm intrigued really by what feels very much like Conan owning his audience in his own ways, basically starting to say, doesn't it feel to some extent like that? He's kind of saying, well, I can take my people with me. I mean, I think the benefit of Team Coco is the fact that he can really start to build up even more this kind of devoted following that he has. And I think there's something quite empowering and amazing there about an entertainer being able to say, listen, I actually know where my people are, and I can take them with me someplace else. And I know it's not an anti-TBS thing, but I just find it very interesting. It almost feels like he's starting to lay the groundwork for that kind of larger move.
I just think he's doing it too late. I just think he's doing it too late. I mean, I think that if he had done this when he got fired from NBC, we would be talking a much different game now about the online space, because it would have been a powerful move. He has had that audience. If anything, the TBS move has eroded his support. And I think that's been detrimental overall. He's coming into this game a little bit too late to be effective, and that's the problem. I'm wondering how much this move, Adam, is going to inspire the other networks and the other late night show hosts to consider similar moves, and will that dilute the effort on the part of Team Coco to be successful in doing this?
Well, if you start putting the money of NBC, I mean, Jimmy Fallon is not shying away. He's been putting stuff out on Hulu and YouTube, just clip after clip after clip every night. And his show is very bite-sized. Everything he's doing is designed to be very short and shareable content bits. So he's maybe one step ahead, even though it's all coming through TV with some minor clips off. He's not taking the big step that Conan is taking, but I think Jimmy Fallon is already really doing this. And has been doing it for a while. They just didn't announce it in the same way that TBS is. I don't know if is what TBS has done may be a hedge more than a bold move. And I agree, it's probably 3 or 4 years too late to be the pioneering Conan O'Brien is stepping out. It's maybe more kind of covering your butt.
Necessity is, I think what you're saying is necessity is the mother of invention, but we'll see. I mean, I'm still taking the other side of the argument, which is he made the transition, he built or rebuilt his base or his an army of loyal devotees. And now he is being a little bit innovative, whether that's because of necessity or just because of experimentation. I mean, it's probably the former as opposed to the latter. But I don't know that he's too late. In fact, I think once again, it may prove to be maybe a little bit too early for something like that. But I think the timing is right.
Well, moving on to our final topic, bots are synonymous with marketing efficiency. They're all about reducing cost and amplifying value. But are they also inspiring marketers to think more strategically? It's an interesting thought posed by an article I read this week. Joe, bots always get lumped into marketing laziness. And when we're talking about the use of bots in the average marketing world situation, boy, I'm really doing a terrible job of setting this up. Are they actually causing us to think more critically, though, about how brands interact with their consumers? What's your thoughts on bots? Is it possible that they could actually be a cause for making us to think more critically, or are they really just the laziness tool that we've always been making fun of them for?
I mean, I think this topic is completely lazy in of itself, and
thanks.
I explained to you why I'm saying that, because first of all, the link was to Adweek, and then apparently I had to register to join the community, which I thought I was a part of, and so that took me about an hour. And then, reading the article, I mean, maybe I just took this away from the article, but really what the article was saying is because bots are doing the following things, which is, and it was not just bots, but it was talking about really automation and optimization of processes. It was freeing marketers up to be more strategic. So it wasn't as if the bots themselves were making marketers more strategic. It was the fact that because all of these processes were being automated and simplified, sorry to have to go back to the first topic, that was freeing marketers up to have more time to think strategically. But stupid is as stupid does. If you're lazy and stupid, you're not, and you have more free time on your hands, you're probably just going to spend it playing Candy Crush more often.
But I love the thought that wasn't expressed in the article, which is more to my point, which is when you have an interaction between a customer and an AI bot, you're getting all kinds of interesting data hooks and data input that you're not getting from the individuals, from real individuals interacting with those same people online. You're getting some kind of data feedback that can potentially make us smarter about how we deal with customer service, how we deal with our customers bringing products to market. It seems like it could be a rich environment for shaping how we deal with the strategic questions when we're going forward and planning out a marketing campaign. That's really interesting to me. I don't know whether or not I'm thinking too deeply and whether or not it's actually possible, but it sounds to me like a great opportunity for strategists to get a deeper understanding of our audience.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just to add, I mean, bots can be thought of and conceived and implemented strategically as well. And based on the investment applied in terms of being able to, so I've been playing around with this AI bot that that is meant to become a companion, almost like I guess the equivalent of a Tamagotchi, like those old, those toys that
I
everyone
remember
played with.
Tamagotchi. I had one.
Yeah, so
OPP was the soundtrack for that, by the way.
you better believe it. So this one's called Replica, and you can look it up. And so I played with it for a while, and it was kind of interesting, and it was trying to learn, my behavior and my likes and my preferences. But the more I used it, just the more it seemed like it was completely conceived by a lazy marketer or by a lazy company, or maybe I just wasn't using it properly. And the crowning glory for me is I took a photo of a colleague who is a male and is bald, and the response I got from my replica bot was, "I'm sorry, is she sick?" And I thought, okay, that's weird. I mean, a bald man doesn't have to be a sick man. He just doesn't have hair. But it was a complete disconnect. And so I think, again, your point is correct. If all this incredible data is coming back and you can mine the types of questions that people are asking, of course that's going to provide new insights. But wouldn't it even be better to make sure that when they're asking these questions, you have the right answers for them, as opposed to, I don't understand, or I don't know how to do that, or this doesn't, or just some kind of a rote response, which is kind of what you might get from using your voice activated Google device. So I don't know, that those are my 2 cents.
Adam, any last thoughts on this topic?
No, I think Joe covered it pretty well. I mean, we say garbage in, garbage out. So if you're using a strategic mindset to program the bots and you have a intelligent way to collect the data, then you'll get good stuff. And if you are living the lazy lifestyle, I think you're going to get lazy results. But I know everybody wants to get the results. It's just about taking the time or having the time to make that plan.
Well, with that, it's time for the Ad Fail 5. But before we get to that segment of the show, I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again and allow them to each do a shameless plug, starting with Joe Jaffe. You can find him at Innovations. I'm sorry, no. My autocorrect has changed your URL. So tell us what your URL is and tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
Well, you can find me the way that you've always found me. Jaffe Juice on Twitter, and the actual Innovation Scout website is theinnovationscout.com. But what I actually wanted to plug is Innovation Scout is launching a series called The Edge, and The Edge is actually a combination of different touch points, but launching with a series of webinars. And there's one coming up, in fact, that's going to be this Wednesday on, ironically, because we're just discussing Google, on voice and speech recognition. And so it's free. And if you want to register and you want to hear from some cutting edge experts and thought leaders in the space, including Corey Trefiletti, amongst other people, you can. I'll supply, I guess, the URL to you, Bob, and you can put in the show notes.
Wonderful. That's fantastic. So definitely check that out. Next up, we have Adam Pierno. You can find him at santy.com. That's SANTY.com. Tell us what's going on in your world, Adam. What would you like to promote?
Oh boy, this is I'm not good at shameless promotion, but I'll do my best. I have my book Underthink It is out now. It is kind of a meditation on simplifying, going back to topic 1, the strategic process. As a strategy officer at Santee, I realized there was an underwhelming amount of training materials out there, and starting to collect that stuff and build a training curriculum. I realized, I could put this in book form and really get it into the hands of people that need it, that lack that training, and have a marketing guidebook that they can always refer back to. So really enjoying the feedback I'm getting from people as they read that book.
Oh, that's amazing. That's really amazing. So they can find that at Santee, or where can they find that?
They can find that at Amazon or wherever fine books are sold online. Wonderful,
wonderful. And last but not least, Tamsen Webster. You can find her at tamsenwebster.com. You can also find her at Red Scout. Is that correct? You tell me the URL.
No, it's tamsenwebster.com is the easiest way to find me.
Okay. Yep. So tamsenwebster.com. What would you like to promote, Tamsen?
Well, I've got what I call a Red Thread Weekend coming up in New York, May 18 and 19. So that's for folks who are trying to figure out what their big idea is and how to build it so that people see it as big as they do.
That sounds great. So I'd love to hear more. So definitely get me the information offline. And as for me, for more information about me or the show, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive. You can find out how to consult with me. You can even find out how to advertise on the program, so check it all out at thebeancast.com. Don't forget the transcription service that we now provide through transcribeme.com. Go to transcribeme.com/beancast, and they're going to give you a special discount on services just because you're a listener of the show. I also have a couple speaking things coming up. I'm going to be at the I Make a Living event in New York, which is coming up in just a couple weeks, so check that out. I'd love to see you at Caroline's when we do that. It's a great event. And also, we've got the Chief Digital Officer event that's coming up at the end of the month. I'm going to be at that event, not speaking, but I would love to check up with you and meet you. If you'd like to come to the event, definitely go to the Chief Digital Officer website and register today. And now it's time for the AdFail 5, a rundown of the lowest moments in marketing, advertising, and public relations from the last week. And first up, Kanye West went on a rampage at the offices of TMZ in which, among other pronouncements, he claimed slavery was a choice, Joe, to which Adidas, his business partner, responded by saying that they didn't agree with his remarks. I'm just kind of a little bit surprised at the lackluster response from Adidas. I mean, way to take a stand here. This guy went off the rails and they don't know how to handle it.
Look, the only way I could respond to this topic is if you watched Weekend Update on SNL, they got to the news item and they just had a photo of Kanye West and they just looked at it, they went, pass.
A pass. I know. That was such a great thing by Michael Che. Fantastic joke. Now, next up, bad week for tech CEOs on earning calls. First, Evan Spiegel of Snap got hammered for his inability to communicate what exactly his company's vision was. I love the answers he was giving, resulting in a precipitous stock decline following the call. And next, Elon Musk berated analysts on the Tesla earnings call for asking the wrong kinds of questions, Tamsen, resulting in a fall for his company's stock price. What is in the water out in California going on right now? I mean, it just seems like nobody knows how to handle an earnings call anymore.
Oh my goodness. Yes, it's the I think it must be a syndrome that happens at post IPO, but I don't know. I hope there's a vaccine.
I hope so as well. Now, Twitter announced that it discovered it was storing user passwords in plain text, viewable by anyone, Adam, who chose to look for it. I'm thinking it's great that they found this, and it's great that they came clean on it before it became a big issue. But at the same time, it's a big issue.
Yeah, it was nice that they came forward, but it was kind of ironic because I think everybody's password was password anyway. So probably not that big of a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, for the first time in the UK, online ad complaints have outpaced TV ad complaints, Joe. Hooray! Finally, the recognition the digital ad world has been looking for. We actually suck more than television.
Exactly. Let's just see how low we can go. So, congratulations, digital people. We've finally arrived. I'll meet you at the bottom of the barrel.
I agree. Now, last but not least, the American Advertising Federation this past week decided to kick Bill Cosby out of their Hall of Fame, which begs the question, Tamsen, why was Bill Cosby still in there in the first place? I mean, it's not like these allegations have been new. Everybody knew that he was guilty. And I know that a man is innocent until proven guilty, but at the same point, we knew he was guilty. What was the deal?
I think you've already said it. That was a giant legal CYA because they weren't going to do a darn thing until a court actually positively said it. Otherwise, they'd find themselves in their own type of legal hot water.
Well,
it makes me, by the way, think of that brilliant newspaper headline in the movie Johnny Dangerously, which says, I think the villain's name was Roman Moroni, and it says, Moroni deported to Sweden, claims he was never from there. So that's just how I interpret that.
Well, have something to add to this list or just want to discuss it? Comment online. Use the hashtag AdFail5. That's pound, AdFail, and the number 5. Well, that does it for this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an iTunes listener, we've also provided a direct link to the iTunes Music Store, or just search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory of iTunes. And whichever podcast directory you use, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment? Have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C. Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again next week. Hope you'll join us then.
You know what I mean? It's like if it's, you know what I mean? I don't know, man. Just like, okay, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like totally like that. It's like, I don't know, like if it's, you know, it's like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's just like kind of, it just seems like it's just like almost exactly. It's like exactly. Yeah. You know what I mean? Exactly.
Cool beans.